Let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome in. My name is Paul Santamaro. I'm Director of Lending and Risk Products at Frandata. Hopefully, you guys know a little bit about Frandata and what we do. Frandata is the leading research and information company that covers the franchise industry. We work with lenders, we work with franchisors, we work with suppliers. We really do anything and everything having to do with the franchise industry. So if you are in any of those buckets, you've probably heard of us. Um, and what we're doing here is more of a regular webinar session. I know that folks that tune into Frandata and have watched our sessions on SBA lending and franchise lending know that we do webinars regularly, but we do them with more time in between, maybe do them every couple of months. And these are longer, long form sessions where we pack a lot of information in. But I was just thinking that a lot of stuff happens in between these sessions. And oftentimes I get information about brands or different topics come up that are really interesting internally, but we don't have any real platform to share that with folks. So we're going to try something that's a little bit more regular. It's going to be a little shorter, more informal, where I'm sharing the screen. I'm going through different things, different topics. We're going to try to do them every week on Wednesdays. There'll be conferences and other things that will obviously affect that, but we're going to try to be as regular as we can. So right around this time, lunchtime, mostly Wednesdays, maybe sometimes Tuesdays to accommodate scheduling. And we'll try to do them every week. We're going to try to have some guests on as well. So I want to start by teasing our next session. So either next week or the week after, we are going to be joined by Taj Adav from Leasecake. And I just want to share him on here, one of the many screen shares that I'm going to do today on the session. So let's go ahead and get screen one shared. We're gonna have Taj Adav on next week or the week after with a company called Leasecake. And the reason they're super interesting is that they do a lot of things with location data and location trafficking and sort of on the ground information, which can be really valuable to our clients and the work that we do. They're using AI now to do a tool for analyzing lease agreements. And I met him at IFA. And essentially what they're trying to do with this score is to balance the playing field between a business owner that might be your borrower and the landlords and leaseholders and folks that we're negotiating with for our leases for these locations. And sort of the thesis behind this is, landlords and real estate people have all the resources and the data and the legal help to be able to work these negotiations, but a business owner really doesn't have that experience, right? They know how to run their business. So there's an imbalance there. So we're going to have Taj on and we're going to talk about his product, but moreover, we're going to do an analysis of the coffee space and we're going to look at some ground level stuff. So we're going to look at performance that we've seen and some information from his platform. So it should be a really interesting session when we get that off. Might be the next week or the week after. I wanted to start us off with a little bit of a funny here and a little bit of information about franchisor conferences. For the folks that are doing biz dev in the franchise world, we are attending now this week the multi-unit franchise conference in Las Vegas. And one of our franchisor clients took out a billboard for one of our franchisor representatives here at Frandata. Her name's Con Simon. And it was super duper funny. We got this shared in our teams this morning. So Con Simon, we are at MUFC. I always get emails and questions from lenders. Are you guys at the conference or at MUFC? We certainly are at the conference this year. With Con being up on the billboard. So that was super funny. But then I started thinking, well, hey, what are the conferences that we attend? Because I know lenders are always asking me, what are the franchisor events that we could attend or we should be at or they're on the calendar? We all attend a lot of SBA events, so we know where to find lenders and find each other. But sometimes franchisors, we don't always know where to go. And I'm often sharing what our top conferences are. So what I just showed you is called Multi-Unit Franchise Conference. That's happening now. It just kicked off last night. And that's in Las Vegas. A lot of these conferences are either in Vegas or Salt Lake City or Orlando and Atlanta, fun cities, big destination cities. So that sort of kicks off the beginning of the franchise conferencing year after the International Franchise Association, the IFA conference. This is all about multi-unit development. So large multi-unit franchisees, brands that are growing. So in this conference, you have suppliers, you have lenders, you have franchisors, you have franchisees, very diverse group of folks that attend that. Later in the calendar year, so if you're now looking ahead to like, all right, I missed that, but what else could I potentially attend this year? Two really great conferences bookend the end of the calendar year. One is called FLDC, that's Franchise Leadership and Development. That is typically in Atlanta, as I mentioned before. And that's much more focused on brands, leaders, and executives. The attendees are franchisor executives, think CEOs, VPs of franchise development, that kind of thing. Suppliers can attend, but there's usually a sponsorship element that comes with that. So we just can't, get a ticket to the event. But really a deal-making conference and a lot of really good conversations that happen there. So if you're like a BDO or someone that's trying to build new relationships, you might have a better time there than even IFA, which has all the different types of folks, has franchisees, has everyone. You might not actually find who you're looking for, but FLDC is a great event. And then typically in November, it's again this year, and we're back in Vegas, is the RFDC, or Restaurant Finance Development Conference, RFDC. And that's a much larger conference again that lenders will attend, franchisees will attend, franchisors. So, folks that attend our webinars aren't always doing franchise lending as a dedicated vertical, but those that are and those that want to get out on the road and understand the events, these are three really good ones. And of course, you can reach out to us and we can give you advice and counsel on where else you should be to sort of connect with these folks in franchising. I want to now move to what's happening in the SBA because we know there's a lot going on there. And I want to talk about some recent things that have been happening, some recent notices, and then talk about the most recent conference that we attended, the Georgia Lender Quality Circle, GLQC. I've got a couple of slides on there about what was talked about, proposed changes. Some of those already happened, so we'll take a look at those. And then some things that we expect to be coming with respect to franchising and franchise registry, but just sort of, what's happening in the space in general. I saw this notice come up in my LinkedIn a couple of days ago, and this is the transcript from a video that came out by Kelly Loeffler, who's the administrator now of the SBA. I'm not going to read through the transcript. You can read through the transcript of it while I'm giving you my thoughts, but there was a video of this that just came out and sort of, setting the tone for what she found in the agency and where we need to go from there. And I just thought that I want to talk about this today just because I felt a little bit uncomfortable with the message and just felt that it wasn't as nuanced and maybe lacked a little bit of perspective about the SBA, how it works, and sort of who the people are that, actually administer and make this program work. Now, a lot of folks on this call know already that the SBA actually doesn't make loans directly in a lot of cases. It's a loan guarantee program. And we all, as Americans, rely on tens of thousands of underwriters, processors, business development people. A lot of you guys are on this call right now, and they all identify in one way or another as SBA bankers or SBA lenders, even though they themselves don't directly work for SBA. And their jobs are about being engaged in the communities and helping them grow. And a lot of them that I've met are really proud of that mission. And for some of them becomes, sort of a calling in life. And that activity, by the way, doesn't happen in the office. That happens, on the street and talking to people and in businesses and in those communities. So I just felt a little uncomfortable for all those people that I know that call themselves SBA lenders, call themselves SBA bankers, but they don't actually work for the agency. But we really rely on them a lot in the small business community. So I was just a little disappointed that that perspective wasn't there. And then I just sort of thinking about like, hey, yes, the SBA did balloon in size during the pandemic. We turned to the SBA in that tough time. The people in the agency and the folks that I just mentioned that work for these lenders, because we had a crisis situation. We needed to get money out to small business people, to people throughout America during the crisis of the pandemic. And we said to these people, we said, stay up all night, process loans till 3 a.m, work on the weekends, drive yourself to the point of tears in some cases. And you guys out there, the lenders, the bankers, the folks at SBA responded to that challenge. And so I'm sort of thinking with this, like, what was the better thing to do? Was the best thing to do to try to retain and maybe retask some of those people that just got a crash course in SBA processing, by the way, into that whole thing? So like, try to retask them or to cut them immediately? What was the best thing to do? I'm open for that discussion, certainly. And should we have downsized them immediately or maybe retest them to this effort of collections rather than some other agency priorities? And we can debate the politics and the good and bad of those things, but just thought it was important to think about this with a little bit of perspective that I know the folks on this call have, but I couldn't help again thinking about all those people in their title that were SBA bankers, and that's what they've been doing for most of their life, that actually don't work for the agency. So those are just my thoughts on this. I hope we move forward and get some real action, some real solutions. A lot of the questions and things that come out of this really dovetail into what we saw at the conference. And so that's where I want to take us now. This, was the sort of is the beginning drumbeat of what we were told at GLQC is going to be coming down the pipe. And I want to bring up, let's take a look. Got a couple of different things here. So got some slides that I want to show you about what we heard at the conference, changes that are coming, and I said some things are already in effect. We're going to go through those. I got a couple of procedural notices that we can flip to. But as a side note, Fran Data, excuse me, I'm not fully sharing that as I would normally do. Let me flip this over for us. Okay. About maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, right around the IFA conference time, Fran Data put out 2 reports that we do on an annual basis on behalf of the International Franchise Association, IFA. One was the Franchising Economic Outlook Report, which is a forecast. So it looks at very macro view of franchising, different sectors and industries, the growth that we expect, the sectors of franchising that we expect to grow, as well as the different regions of the country. So from a planning perspective, from a top level, what's happening in the franchise space, that's a really great read. And I've got the QR codes on the screen here for both of those. So go ahead and grab those. And then the second one that we did right around that same time frame was the IFA Franchisor Survey. And that is really cool to read because that is a survey of franchisor and brand executives. So the CEOs, the VPs of franchise development, the marketing folks to get their pulse on what they see happening, what their goals are for 2025, and really what they think the headwinds and tailwinds might be for their business. So think about things like inflation, things like the cost to open these units, labor concerns, the quality and the ability and the availability. Both sides of those are really important for franchisors right now. So those are just some QR codes. We're not going to talk about those reports today, but if you want to take a look at them, I thought I'd share the QR codes while we were chatting so that you can have access to both of those. With respect to the updates from GLQC, this was written about a week ago. And so we had put some of these under predictions, what we think is going to happen. Some of this stuff actually did happen. But we do believe that the definition of a small loan is going to go back to a smaller amount, maybe 250 or 350. But the idea of a small loan and what we've seen from the administrator, that's going to be curtailed. We do believe that it is likely that the SBA franchise registry is going to return in some form. This is one of the questions that we got a lot of when we asked folks to submit ahead of this call. We do think it's going to come back in some form. What that form is, we are not sure yet. We have heard from SBA, we've heard from NAGLE, we've had IFA in conversations. Basically, they are looking to understand what the best way is to stand this up again, who should be managing it, who should be involved, and what the scope of that directory should be. But the wide-ranging consensus is that lenders relied on that and want to continue to rely on it from an eligibility perspective. Now, there is a question about, well, if the franchise registry comes back, do the affiliation rules with it come back? Because we remember back to the reg change that removed the directory, they also removed the affiliation, but the concept of affiliation as a matter of ineligibility for franchise agreements. That would require a reg change. That's something that the SBA said in their presentation. That would require a reg change to bring back the affiliation rules, but it may not require one to do a franchise directory. So there may be some nuance in how they exactly execute this. But we do think that that is going to come back. And I think in general, that's going to be a good thing for banks to just get more certainty into the process. One of the questions that we had submitted was, around this topic that said which franchisors, and they wanted us to list them out, which we can't really do, but which franchisors are taking advantage or abusing the lack of SBA franchise directory oversight over their agreements. I can tell you that it's not a large number of brands, and I don't even have a name of a brand that I could point to and say they are abusing it. That they said, "Oh wow, there's no rules over here, so we're going to go rush in and change our agreements." But there have been brands that changed their agreements because they wanted them to read a certain way, and there have been lenders that weren't aware of certain changes and weren't set up to review those changes. And then they got themselves into difficult situations, mostly having to do with things like right of first refusal, step-in rights, and the ability of the borrower to sell their unit to other buyers and what the restrictions along that would be. So I don't have any, broad-based brands that are making changes, but it's something definitely to pay attention to. Based on the chatter from the folks, we do think that we're going to see a new SBA SOP likely in the next maybe month or two. Other things, we think equity injections are going to come back for business acquisitions and startups. Score and go underwriting for loans up to 500K are going to go back to a lower number, where basically the threshold of where you can use the score and go methodology. And the long and the short of that from SBA was FICO's coming back and saying that FICO score, the score and go loans for loan amounts above 250 or 350K are not sufficiently predictable to the outcome of the loan to be able to use FICO and just score and go for that amount. So they're looking to change that. A lot of the theme that you're going to see here from this, the policy notices, the changes are around credit quality and the perception and really the reality that the program has had increasing losses and moreover has gone to zero subsidy in the last, maybe 2.5 to 3 years. Fees are going to return for the program for loans under 1 million, and that is our first screen shared policy notice of the call. That one, this is something I was going to talk about with PPP, but I'm not going to go there. Just in terms of like what was set up to actually pay back PPP loan money. There's a process to pay back PPP loans that already exists. Let's go in. I want to see two things. Here's the procedural, well, it wasn't a procedural notice. If you're looking for this, it's an information notice. That's why you can't find it on their procedural notice. Came out 2 days ago. And this is what is changing the fees and putting back guarantee fees for loans under $1 million. So this is going to be effective tomorrow. So anything that you're processing under delegated starting tomorrow up to and including the end of this SBA fiscal year, which is the September 30th, 2025, it starts tomorrow. Same thing for loans on a non-delegated basis. There's some information about that. They adjusted the annual service fee, 0.55%. And then in terms of the guarantee fee, this is what was interesting part of this too, is what percentage of the fee must be remitted back to SBA. They're stating that specifically. And it breaks down here for loans in different loan size ranges, 150K and under, 2% of the guarantee portion, and saying that lender may retain no more than 25% of the fee. Now, I'm not sure if that retain no more than 25% applies to the other classes of loan, whereby for loans of 150K to 700K, there's 3% of the guarantee portion, and we can only keep 25% of the fee. So that's going to be what, like 0.75%. And sort of wondering like, okay, so who's left? What is that left for? That's for the lender and the broker and the referral source and the LSP. Like what's happening with that? It seems that a lot more of the guaranteed portion of the fees are going to be going to SBA, and that's going to be something that's going to affect your broker relationships and other folks that are in the pipeline, in these deal pipelines. We're not allowed to split loans for the purpose of avoiding fees. And one other thing that I did note here is that they did have some carve outs and some cutouts there for veteran-owned businesses. So it's not completely gone if it's a veteran-owned business. And there's a lot of that goes on in franchising. There's some relief there. So we did get an information notice on that. There is a verification platform which took away lenders' PLP authority that may be getting changed to give them their authority back. There's going to be a streamlined policy for environmental reviews. That policy notice is up. I didn't bring that on here. And this was, again, a question that came in. And the question was more around, I'll read it specifically. The question asked, how will reported SBA staffing cuts and proposed policy changes potentially impact overall lending appetite and risk measurement? There are going to be effects from SBA's reduction in personnel. But I don't know that that is going to reduce the lending appetite for clients that we work with respect to franchising. I think those are two different things. And it certainly isn't going to affect the risk measurement because we're doing our underwriting internally at our institutions, and the SBA isn't underwriting our deals, our franchise loans in most of these cases, as far as I'm aware. So from a credit analysis perspective, I don't expect there to be any change. I don't expect there to be a change from an appetite perspective because all the other factors of franchising growth and lenders wanting to get money out there have remained unchanged. It will, though, increase processing times and lead to just a degraded overall experience from the processing side from a bank perspective. We see a lot of career people that are retiring or have retired. And even at the conference that we were at, there were SBA people that were scheduled to speak and be there in person. Their travel was cut. They had to do these sessions by remote. Fine. They were still fantastic sessions. They did a great job. But, I would expect there to be some delays in processing, in responding to questions, in those types of things that require a response from a person. But I don't think it's going to affect the underwriting of franchise loans in any way. Why all the changes? Well, I mean, folks on the call know that we deal with this really every 4 to 8 years anyway, whenever we see a change in administration. So SBA lenders on the call know how to roll with the punches. We see changes like this all the time. There has been an uptick in losses in the SBA program over the last 3 to 4 years. The numbers that we got from the session of SBA said, hey, historically, the SBA has hovered around a 0.6 to 0.8% early default rate. That rate's risen every month of late and is now at a 1.4% early default rate. So where there's smoke, there's fire. There are some issues that are happening. Combine that with collecting little to no fees on 85% of the portfolio or under $1 million loans, the SBA program was pushed into a net operating loss. So there's a major drive, and we've already seen it. We've seen it with the video from Kelly Leffler. We've seen it with some of the policy notices and the information notices. Big drive to return SBA to a zero subsidy program, as it has been for the majority of its life. The loan volume hasn't dropped at all. And I'm going to give you a slide coming up about franchise activity in the SBA portfolio, because there was a question about as well, how do I look at SBA performance? How do I find information on SBA failure rates of franchises? So we'll take a look at that. But the volume in S7A lending is up 40% year to date, and that was from the session as well. There's a lot of chatter at the conference of things that people have seen, and to the point of early defaults, I had a lender that we work with said that they had a first payment default for the first time ever in their portfolio. And if you're on the call, I'm sorry, I love you. But they had a first payment default in their portfolio for the first time ever from a roofing franchise. And this is something that they had never, ever experienced before as a lender, as a 30-year career as a lender, to have a first payment default. But, the question was, the follow-on questions were about, well, how do I know about the working capital? And, do I help the franchisee to continue and not fail, or do I just walk away? There were so many answered questions from a brand performance perspective that we are seeing some of that happen when it comes to what's happening on the ground with these folks. I said that is there a question about, well, if you look at the SBA data in the portfolio, is there a downward trend? The answer to that question is that there is currently a serious level of underreporting in the SBA portfolio when it comes to franchise lending and franchise loans since the SBA directory was taken offline. One of the things that the SBA directory afforded us was a coding system. We have a franchise coding system called Franz number. SBA had an SBA code that it was applying to franchise loans, and lenders had to put that information into E-Tran or into the processing system when they would make a loan to a franchise. Well, when the SBA directory was taken down, that requirement to include that franchise code was also removed for lenders. Now, a lot of banks have continued to use that code. So there's still information out there. But it is not as comprehensive as it was in the past because some banks aren't reporting in the same way that they did before. But our research has shown that there has not been a drop in actual lending to franchises, just in the reporting that we've seen. So there are lots of different ways to get this information. There's publicly available information on SBA performance. A company out there called Lumos that we work with has now taken over the Coleman report, which is something that I know a lot of folks on this call were familiar with. That information is still available. A lot of different places you can get it, but be aware of late there's underreporting in the portfolio. And the changes that have already happened, we know the SBA is focusing on American manufacturing. Administrative left orders touring the country to have that happen. Policy notices on federal agencies stopping public benefits to illegal aliens. That does apply to the 7A and the 504 program. There's a lot of new rule and reg around LPRs and legal permanent residents, how to make sure that none of those folks are benefiting from the loan, and lenders need to verify that status through USCIS. So lots of nuanced information around that. The final update that I had on the screen before was just around some form changes. They announced that the forms are going to be changed to replace the term gender with the term sex, and there were some questions about when that was going to happen, who was responsible for that. An order that came out on the 19th outlined that they are going to be replacing the term in Form 1919, so that's all going to be there too for you guys. All right. I think that's everything that I wanted to go over with you guys. That's all my web pages. I'm going to go back. It's all my screen shares. I'll put my contact information back on screen here. It looks like I've got a couple of questions in the chat bar, so I'm going to look at that. Of my submitted questions, let's just see if there's anything that I missed. We talked about changes, staffing cuts, delinquency rates. One question that did pop out, it was just very straightforward. Should community banks finance franchises if you do not have a procedure to analyze and underwrite franchises? Probably not, but we can help you do that. For any lender out there, if you're new to franchise lending, the most easiest 101 thumbnail that I can give you from right now in 30 seconds is underwrite the borrower and underwrite the brand. So you've got your borrower performance and you know how they are and where they're coming from and their FICO scores and their wherewithal. You need to carve out to underwrite the brand's performance. Where is it gone? Where is it going? Does it close units? You know, is the brand profitable? And all that stuff is what we do for lenders in our fund reports and those types of things. So, all right. Couple of questions and comments, just some good feelings for SBA lenders. Diana Seaborn has come back. That's good news. Some really good comments just around how are we going to deal with the Department of Education loans if we're laying off employees. We are going to email out the deck. If you'd like that couple of slides on the updates and the QR code, I will send that out. And Chuck Evans, a great friend of mine, is commenting very smartly that there are LSPs that can help navigate this situation. So definitely know about that. Guys, this was fun. We're going to come back next week. I said we have the Taj Vadav thing scheduled. He's either going to be with us next week on the 2nd or on the 9th. I have to ping him and just lock him down. But there will be no shortage of things to happen between now and next week in the franchise world. If there's nothing topical SBA, we may grab a franchise brand and look at performance. Melinda, are you she's signaling me. I'm getting a signal from outside the thing. Here, come on in. Oh, yes. Melinda wanted to let you guys know that you can help choose the name of this. We didn't want to put a name on it, really, because I didn't want to put it in a box before we sort of understood what it was. So if you have any like fun names for what this conversation session with me would be, submit those also. And I'm interested to hearing what you guys come up with. So thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. See you guys next week and have a good one. Take care.